right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. And today we're going to talk about and focus on setting up online virtual workshops. So utilizing that tool for you to leverage to attract and work with more folks that will work with you to show your expertise, okay? So I'm going to start with sort of subject matter ideas first. If you hadn't thought about that, sorry, my little striped shirt looks like it's going a little crazy on the screen. Start with sort of some ideas. What are some things that you would be comfortable getting in front of a couple people with? And again, this isn't about having hundreds of people, right? All we need is a couple of people that we can get in front of and have sort of a nice conversation about that would potentially work with us. And that's really good leverage because it also shows you as sort of the expert in the field, which we're always saying, right? You want to be the expert. You want to be the one that's helping them through the process. So what are some of the ideas for virtual workshops? Well, the most common one that you see all the time is first-time homebuyer workshops, right? For someone that's looking, so it's a why pay rent when you can own type of approach so that you educate them on sort of what are the advantages of buying a house. Again, for those folks, that's typically about education. They don't know what's involved. They don't know whether they can afford to buy a house. They don't know what the advantages are. And so the workshop would focus on helping to identify that, right? So why pay rent when you can own, first-time homebuyer workshop, if you call it that, or any sort of creative version of that. Some of the other topics that work really well and can attract some attention, especially more so in this market. And that's why I'm doing this now, because these are around all the time and we do some of these sometimes in person, but the virtual piece is nice because people want to learn right now and they want to plug in and they have time. So again, this is an important time to look at this. Another possible idea is downsizing. Have you considered downsizing or selling the family home or, something along that line that ties into transitioning into a smaller property. So those folks typically need help with, how do I clean out? What are my my sale options? Can I bring in like an estate, an auction house type of thing to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff if I have a big house? They tie into sort of the organizational piece. They might need help organizing, getting dumpsters, right? And so for those folks, it's really about planning about, well, how does this transition look? What do you want to take with you? What don't you want to take with you? And ideally, what does that end result look like for you? And so for them, it's more coming from resource of, like I said, organizational people, maybe someone who comes in and does estate stuff if they have a lot of stuff, auctions, setting up an auction online. So lots of possibilities there. Some of the other ones we've seen, investment seminars, for folks that want to get in an investment. So you want, I'm giving you a couple title ideas here as I go through this, looking for positive cash flow, looking for passive income. That's where a lot of investors approach that from the passive income standpoint. And, for someone, or stepping into the investment game, buying your first multifamily, anything like that. Because again, if somebody has multiple properties, right, they're not typically looking for an education on that. They might be looking for a different level. So you want to approach it from someone that doesn't have a multifamily that would be interested in hearing sort of about what are the nuances of that? What kind of money do I need to have? How do I get pre-approved for that? In a case of like an investment piece, understanding that the rents come into consideration, as part of their income. Like, so how do they qualify, right? So there's all kinds of components that you can educate on that piece of stepping into the investment world or stepping into the investment piece or opening up yourself for passive income. So let's see, we got first-time home buyer, we've got downsizing, we've got investors. What other kind of things might work out there in the real estate piece from you could go commercial if you have commercial contacts. So whether it's investing in commercial buildings or making a step into the commercial world, building your portfolio through commercial properties, if you have the right contacts to do that, that's another area you can go. What else could we do? Any other good ideas floating around out there?
So I was thinking, Paula, of just trying to put something together that people could tune into just in terms of market stats and make it specific to, my town. I'm connected on Facebook with a lot of, you know, a lot of people from my community, a lot of people from our church, from our, you know, area. And I was thinking of, you know, even just doing, I don't know if you'd call it a workshop, but more of an informational session on, you know, what's happening in the Medford market right now, because people are interested. And every time I talk to somebody, they ask me, but to do something a little more broad or, you know, where people can ask specific questions.
Yeah. So as opposed to a workshop, that is a little bit of a different venue because that's more coming from information. So that's like a Medford Minute with Jen, right? That you do a market update, so you don't necessarily need everybody to be logged on with you from an education standpoint at that.
Right.
That could be something that you're blasting out, right?
Yeah.
But definitely a great idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there could be, you know, I mean, there's other ideas in terms of maybe it's for folks that want to become a real estate agent. What does it look like to become a real estate agent? We have a 2% revenue share in this company for anybody that you bring in. And there's a lot of folks out there floating around from the career side now. So, you know, a workshop on what would it look like to become a real estate agent? What are the required steps? And I mean, I can help give you some of that information, but what does that look like? And, you know, what does a day in the life of a real estate agent look like? And how does that set up, right?
Yeah.
You know, on the rental side, you know, you might want to potentially, and I don't know, again, you'd have to think about this in terms of quality and the money you can make off of it, right? Because you got to put some work into this in terms of advertising. But it might be, you know, you might have a workshop for folks that try to attract the folks that are coming into the Boston market that might be looking for rentals. So, you know, the 411 on rentals in the Boston area, and what do you need to know before you come here? You know, trying something along that line that to see, you know, could you attract those folks that are in transition that are looking to make a move into Boston that might want a higher level education first before they dive into the search. And for that one, that's probably more about areas, general rental practices, right? Having that, you know, understanding the fee structure, how that works, difference between a luxury building versus living in like a property, right? And what that might look like for options. So again, you know, there's some ideas around that. I'm trying to be really,
No, I just said, yeah, I agree. That's.
Anybody else have any other good ideas? I think we're throwing around a lot of them here. The creative juices are flowing today. You got me on a good day. Some days I can't even come up with anything. I'm sure I'll think of more as I continue to talk, because it's, you know, really honestly, all you have to think about if you're trying to come up with a workshop idea, okay? And I didn't do this before I got on, and I wish I had, because I do this all the time. Google, what's the top question people looking to buy real estate have? Or, you know, what's the top issue people looking to buy real estate have? And see what kind of stuff what's the top search? Because that'll kind of tell you what the problem is that's out there. And then you're going to be able to attract more people if you can solve a problem that's sort of the bigger problem out there. Okay? So think of it in terms of, not from an agent I'm going to present, think of it, who's hanging out there that may want to do something. You know, they may want to go from a rental to a buy. They may want to buy that investment property. Those are where those come from value. So think of it in terms of that when you're trying to come up with an idea. And if you want to, you know, float something by me, let me know. I'm happy to give you specific guidance if you come up with a different topic before you go too far down the line. So the next piece we want to break down. So you have to come up with your idea, right? That's step one. Come up with your idea. What do I want to work on? Stick in your wheelhouse. You know, if you're not in the commercial arena, stay away from the commercial stuff. Obviously, stick to something you know, because you need to be the expert, or something you want to learn. Go out and get the information. But best to stick to something that, you know, that you're going to be comfortable with, at least have some base to start with. The next piece I think you want to do is identify where would you pull people from. So before I even jump into lining up my panel and getting up my stuff, step two would be, where is my pool of people going to come from? Okay, where's my audience going to come from? And how am I going to attract that audience? So I'll give you some ideas. Social media, right? Putting together something and asking some questions and generating some conversations around your topic on social media, so that you eventually start to get a list of folks that are you know, engaged and intrigued and following up that way. There might be, in certain instances, certain target markets you could go after. So if we're looking to do a rent to buy, maybe we target luxury buildings in Boston with a mailer of some sort or a phone call to invite them to a workshop. So we try to reach outside of our network that way. so I mean, you have to kind of, there's all kinds of different ways to do this, right? Email, phone, social media, target marketing. We have to figure out what's the best way for me to get to an audience so that I can try to pull maybe 5 to 10 people in on something like this, right? And remember, you have to think conversion numbers. So ideally, if in the end I want to have like 5 people on the screen with me, I probably want to have a good 25 people registered in today's world. Just because of conversion numbers. People get busy with work or they forget, and you're going to be good about sending out reminders and stuff, but just keep that in mind. Again, it depends on their motivation and what's going on at that moment, and also not doing something too far out so that you don't lose track of them because it's moved out past the quarantine being lifted and life has changed. So you're going to have to balance having enough time to pull the audience in, but getting that session on there fast enough to keep their interest and keep them plugged in. That makes sense?
You're right.
So step 1, identify the type. Step 2, where am I going after these people? Where are these people? Where am I going to find these people? How am I going to find them? Is there a list available somewhere that I can pull? Am I going to use social media platforms? Am I going to use email? Am I going to use a combination? Really map out how you're going to go after people, okay? Step 3 is to create a compelling, I'm going to use a big word, compelling collateral piece, basically, but a compelling marketing piece. So you want to put together something that's going to catch people's attention. The admins can help you with this once you have an idea, or you can do something in not PowerPoint. What's the other one? Publisher. You can do something in Publisher, something so you can put in graphics, you can put in pictures, but you want to make it compelling. You want to have some good information in there in terms of drawing people in. Now, you do want to have a Zoom set up already for that so that you can have some kind of link, or I would generate like a QR code. Those are easy to do. If you look at the apps to generate QR codes or online, generate a QR code that they could scan on their phone or hit on the computer, and it would take them right into a registration form for your Zoom webinar, where it just asks for their name and all that's required to do that is you have to set the webinar up that registration's required. So if it's set up for registrations required, then that step gets put into the process. So we want good material, right? So similar to the material that corporate generated for me for yesterday for the panel. You want something that talks about, this is what we're here to talk about, or have you ever worried about this? I want something that's eye-catching, that catches people's attention. They say, hey, I want to hear about that. I want more information. Now, if you're going to, depending on the audience you're going after, you're going to have to either tout some expertise or not. If you're going after people that know you and know you're an agent, know you're qualified, and you're going to go after that target, then I don't have to do so much selling, right? But if I'm going after luxury buildings in Boston and they don't even know who my name is, then I might have to put a little something about either the company or the Berkshire Hathaway or something, just to to compel them in that I'm the expert. I'm the one that you want to hear talk about this subject. Okay, so create a good collateral piece, create something that can, that can go well on social media. It's got to be a picture for social media. It might need to be a PDF for some formats. You might actually even do like a little video clip promoting it that you're going to get out there, right? So you might have a combination of pieces. Some other things, if you decide you want to expand a little bit and spend a little money, you can do Google ads, you can do Facebook ads, you can do a target market on that, so that you're trying to get folks like from the first-time home buyer or for the investment side. You could actually try to get some traction that way as well if you wanted to throw a little bit of money at it. Okay, so now we've got our collateral piece. In conjunction with that, it depends on how you're going to put this together. You want to set up what experts you need to come in on the call with you. Okay. Yeah. So now typically you're not going to tie a whole bunch of people up for something that may or may not happen, but you may want to reach out to, like the mortgage guy in the legal, like Scott Sellers, and say, hey, will you pencil me in your calendar for this day? I'm going to try to work on a home buyer workshop. Sometimes with those folks, I go the other direction. I do the material. I say, we're going to talk about legal, we're going to talk about mortgage, but I don't necessarily talk about for who the panel is. And so then I have some flexibility that when I get 5 or 6 people, I can reach out to the mortgage broker and say, hey, I've got a seminar booked. I've got 5 or 6 people coming. I need a good mortgage broker. What can you throw in for my people that are going to be on the seminar? Can you throw something in for them as part of that process? Okay. So lining up the panel, which would be next, and so again, depending on the timing with your collateral people, if it's a certain subject where other experts would give you credibility, then obviously line them up first and include them on the collateral material. But a lot of times for the stuff that we're talking about, it's more about the appeal of the topic, right? It's more the appeal of the topic, and then you letting them know why they should come listen to you about that topic, why that would make sense. Okay. Lining up the panel. So I want you to think about, well, let's talk about logistics of the webinar or the training or whatever that you're going to host, the meeting. You don't want too many panel people, right? I don't want to have too many people coming in and out of a presentation. Especially, it's a little easier to do that if I'm in person than if I'm trying to coordinate that on a webinar, right? So like you saw me yesterday on the webinar with the 4 experts, right? And we bounced around and stuff. That's kind of a cap. 4 people and a host is kind of, for me, a cap. Like that even pushes it sometimes, because you want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. We're not going to go too long typically with a seminar like that, right? And you don't want it to be too confusing for the folks. Like who are my experts? Who really came in? Like if it's too complicated, then, or too much information, too complicated, they're not going to be able to take action coming out of that. And we really want to know what that action is that we want coming out of that. What is it that we want them to do? Do we want them to sign up for us to be their buyer's agent? Do we want them to now put in their information so they can connect with the mortgage broker to get the pre-approval? Do we want them, we want to identify what is that action item that's going to come out of this, not just, oh, that was a great meeting, great, they go on their way, and you're like, well, now what? I don't have any more clients. I don't have more clients, because you're doing this for a reason. You're doing this to build pipeline, right? And so you always have to keep that in mind. In order to build pipeline, I need to come from value, give them information, then execute and close the deal, right? And that's going to typically come from that action piece. So line up your panel. And make sure, that next step for me would be also setting up either, whether it's email. I would even actually, in this case, because of Zoom, I would set up a pre-workshop meeting with the panel. So I would say, the workshop's tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Can you guys do a pre-meeting on today at 9 or 1 or whatever? Just so everybody pops on a webinar, a Zoom. You have sort of the opportunity to sort of talk to them about, here's the outline of what I want the session to look like, and you should develop an outline. This is the flow. This is the topics we should talk about. Are we going to do a PowerPoint presentation, or are we going to do just a talk? Like, you want to sort of play out what do we want to actually do with this, right? We want to put a PowerPoint together. Well, then each of you would get me your slides, and then we would transition from speaker to speaker that way with the relevant information. Do we need to have any kind of handouts created for these folks? What would be useful information for them to take following this? Again, that would tie them into us and into action items. We don't want to just be giving away free information, but what can we offer valuable pieces that we can add into the formula? Okay, so you'd meet with those folks, you'd set up your plan. You want to have a good, clear outline of your session. This goes into sort of course development 101, but you want to have a good, clear outline. What do I want to be talking about? What do I think that time frame is? Okay, so I'm going to do a first-time, I'll give you an example. I'm going to do a first-time home buyer seminar, right? So I'm going to, I'll get up, I'm going to do a 5-minute introduction, welcoming everybody, setting up the objective of what we're going to do over this next hour with them, maybe introducing the panel members at that point. And then we're going to walk through what's a logical process based on what we're trying to teach them, right? So in a first-time homebuyer seminar, a logical next step is, are you qualified? Can you get a mortgage? So I might bring the mortgage broker up. He might talk very quickly about, this is what the rates look like. This is what, again, you don't want to bore people, right? So I want the mortgage broker to say things like, so maybe you're right now paying $3,000 in rent. Let's talk about what you could afford if you were paying $3,000 in rent potentially for a mortgage amount, so that it's applicable and it makes sense to them. And you might even have the mortgage broker talk about that process that, okay, well, you might not be ready today for a mortgage, but we can work on fixing your credit and getting things lined up and give you the action items that you need to take so that you're ready in 3 months or 6 months, right? So from the mortgage broker standpoint, in that seminar, I'd have them say, okay, what does it look like to get approved quickly? What's that process look like? What's the payment type of stuff look like now? What are the considerations you should take into account from financing? Like, oh, you're buying a condo. Let's not forget about the condo fee and the taxes, right? So giving them a basic education, not going through like the mortgage process and the banks and lending and all that. They don't care about that, right? All they care about is, what can I afford? What does that payment look like? What kind of paperwork are you going to need for me to go forward to do this from me, right? What do we need from them for them to do that, and what can we give them back? And then from there, I might be jumping into, I might come back on and say, this is great. Now you've got your pre-approval. And so this is how you and I are going to get out there and actually start to look at properties. We'll have a one-on-one consultation where we'll talk about what's important to you and what areas you're looking for and take into account your budget. And then from there, we'll start to actually look at properties and go out and plug in and go through the showing process. You might at that point go through a quick run of the offer component or the paperwork. And again, I'm not talking about going through the whole offer, but just saying, look, so here's what's going to happen when you find a property. You got to put this in layman's terms, right? So when you find a property in Massachusetts, what we're going to do is we're going to put in something called an offer. And at that stage, you're going to need to have some money to come to the table with. So let's talk about what you're going to need at that point. You're going to need to have $1,000 when we do the offer. And then you're going to need to have some money because we're probably going to do some inspections, right? And then we're going to do something called a purchase and sales agreement, which is the next stage of the contract. And at that point, you're probably you're most likely going to need about 5% down, right? So you're going to kind of give it from their side, that walking them through the process and educating. Okay, I wouldn't go into like heavy P&S conversations and all that stuff. It's really just about these are going to be the expectations of you. This is going to be the money you're going to need to have. This is how we're going to protect your money in the deal. Those would be probably the big topics there. Then you might have a lawyer that comes in and talks about that closing piece, right? This is how, once we get this contract, these are some basics on home ownership in terms of some of the things we're going to be looking for and how that closing might look, what that closing is going to look like, what that timing looks like typically. You may have a home inspector come in to talk about the home inspection process and things to look at, again, depending on how specific you want to get to these. You might have a moving company plugged in. But again, I'd be careful not to plug too many people in. These are just some ideas of some of the options you might have, right? So like we have a Berkshire Hathaway agreement with Olympia Moving. And they offer, my girlfriend's just using them. I think it's like a 20% off because they're Berkshire Hathaway client. So anybody you can plug into where you can then turn to these people and give them something. Like, so by the way, when you work with me, I'm going to give you this great certificate, so that'll save you 20% on the move. And, maybe the mortgage broker that's plugged in, he's going to say he's not maybe throwing something in or offering something, so that they get something for coming into the workshop. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So have a good, clear outline, have a good, clear plan, have a good, clear schedule of timing. And so that when you have that pre-meeting with the other panelists that are going to be on with you, you can really talk about what that timing needs to look like so that it does, what you have to make sure it doesn't do is run on. Like you have to make sure that you drive it as the host of that webinar or that class workshop. You have to drive it. So you have to say to the mortgage broker, here's my expectation of, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and here's the things that I'd like you to cover. Because that's what will flow. You don't want a mortgage broker that's going to run out and talk about the federal rates and all. People aren't going to care. So you want to set that agenda and what the topics are that you're going to go through so that the whole workshop, that's how you get the cohesion in the whole workshop because you've thought it through from top to bottom. Okay, does that make sense? So you got your panel, you've got an organized outline. You're going to have to work. Be realistic about this. You have to hustle, baby, to fill that workshop. You got to get out there and hustle. You got to be on social media. You got to send out the mailings. You got to repost on social media. You got to entice your friends to share, right? You've got to, there's all kinds of ways that you can do that. I've seen some great things in the past when we were able to congregate. People would hold these in bars and have like a little cocktail hour. So maybe you do something like, come to my webinar and, come learn how to buy a house instead of paying rent and be entered to win a $50 Amex gift card. Or, something that sort of entices more people to come and maybe pay closer attention to you. And really, a $50 investment in a gift card, if you can get 5 or 6 people in front of you when you talk about real estate, potentially turn them into buyers, is cheap money, right? That's cheap money. So think about what you can sort of offer to entice in this process as well, potentially. And then you're going to hustle some more. hustle, call, pick up the phone. I know from my standpoint, you have to look at, when you're even coming up with this, you want to think about, okay, when you're thinking about that network, you want to think about, well, what are my plugs into that network? Like, we all have people in our life, I'll call the influencers, that have that connection, right? They've got the great social media platform, or they've got that great connection of friends. If I'm looking for first-time home buyers, I want to be plugged in really well in that millennial section, right, that's out there buying, or at least have some contacts that can help share into that, right? So think about that in terms of, how am I going to get out to that? How am I going to get to, who do I want to get to first? And then how do I get to those folks? And then think about in your own life, who those influences that I have. Like, sometimes I'll say to my kid, hey, do me a favor, I put this on Facebook, go out and share it. Because I know he's got a whole nother network beyond what I have, right? So who are your influences in your social media and in your life that could actually help you leverage that as well, right? Who else could leverage that for you as well? And where else could you plug in? We have in the past also had a couple people team up. Like we did one in the office. Debbie did this in the Newton office not that long ago. And so a couple of the new agents actually teamed up together to do this and invited people. So were you part of that, David? Yeah, that went really well, right? I can't hear you. Hold on, I'm gonna unmute you so I can hear you.
I did one myself.
You did one yourself?
Yeah, I've done 2 so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, even if you're not comfortable that you have enough of a network, then maybe reach out to a couple people you've worked with in the training and stuff and say, hey, look, how about we put this on together? We'll get, that one Debbie did, I think they ended up with like 8, 9, 10 people in the room. And there was a couple agents that had each invited a couple people. So it kind of filled the room a little bit faster, right? So it's a way to potentially fill that workshop up, and then you each at least get your buyers out of that, and maybe you have a plan for if you get any general people, how you're just going to work that, right? So all kinds of options there, all kinds of options. So then we've hustled, we've got the plan set up, we've got the panelists ready, we've got the people plugging in, so we're on a Zoom call, be prepared. Is there any material that you need to share with folks? And I think Carla's on this call. I think Carla's helped Debbie post stuff on Zoom for, let me see if it's on here. There's a place I think where you can post documents. I don't know whether, or send links or send information, share information, but be organized. Have your stuff ready. If you're going to do a PowerPoint, have that screen set up and ready to go so that you can easily share screen and flip back and forth. If you're going to do a quick MLS demo, have that logged in and up. So you can do a quick screen share, right? So that you can flip back and forth if you're going to do that. If you're not really proficient on the whole doing the workshop, teaching, working with Zoom, don't do a lot of flipping back and forth. Try to keep it as simple as possible. And if you wanted to do something that was really simple, then that typically ties to a PowerPoint presentation, because then you can embed different information in there. And so it's all just, you just scrolling through there and not having to link around and potentially get held up that direction. If you need any templates like Berkshire Hathaway templates or anything for that, let me know. We have a lot of that stuff available and easy to do. Keep your timings, keep the presentation simple. Make sure you leave plenty of opportunity for questions and interaction, because these are folks that came to learn, that want to take action. And the more time you give them to ask questions, the more you're going to get to learn about them, right? And you get that relationship going with them. So you want to make sure you leave a lot of time for questions. And I would say you keep these ideally they're an hour at most. If you go over, an hour and a half tops, when you start talking about something like 2 hours, people just don't plug in for something like that. So, to me, an hour is tops. And you might want to set your flow up for like 30 to 45 minutes. so that there's a lot of room there for interaction and sort of taking people to that next step and figuring out what that looks like. Does that make sense? So maybe like, I'm doing a first-time homebuyer seminar, and I might have given them a little information on what it means to be in a buyer contract. Like, so if you work with me exclusively, this is what I can make sure happens for you. We work together, and that way I can make sure I can find things on market and off market for you. So maybe at the end of the webinar, I'm saying something like, so here's the deal. Anybody who wants me to send over that exclusive buyer rep agreement to your email right now, I'll actually give you a, $200 credit for a home inspection, or whatever, anything you can work from a vendor or that you want to throw in to entice those people. That's a great opportunity. I mean, if I can get a buyer rep agreement, right? It's worth the $100 credit on their home inspection. It's worth the $100 Amex gift card, right? Some people out there spending $1,000 a month for leads when you can do something like this for a couple $100 and actually get real people, get qualified people that actually want to take action, not just entering junk online. That makes sense? So now we've presented, we've made sure we have a very strong call to action, right? We want to, send me that buyer contract. Maybe it's if it's for the investment piece, say, look, let's talk about getting you on our newsletter, regular newsletter with the properties, or a regular update with our properties. So, send me your information today, and we'll get you over the agency disclosure form, and we'll put you in the MLS so that you're getting the updates, or we'll put you on our newsletter, whatever that is that makes sense for you to plug them into you going forward, right? And then, and here's the piece where everybody falls down. What's the follow-up plan? What do I do after this? What's my, the people who registered that didn't show up, what am I going to do with them? How am I going to engage with them? What about the folks that did show up? What's my plan to follow up with them? 1 day, 2 days, a week from now? How do I take action and really stay on top of them and follow up? Because that's where the real conversion takes place, right? They're going to love you in the session. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, that's great. Okay, we want to do that. And then they're going to step out and they're going to go back to life. It's what happens with our buyers, right? It's what happens with the listing opportunity sometimes. They step back out to their life and they get busy and they're like, yeah, okay, I forgot about that. You have to have a very solid follow-up plan for those folks. Those now become part of your database. But specifically for them, I would have a fairly aggressive, for at least a couple of weeks plan until you get them signed. And then maybe from there, it's like an every week where you either put them in a newsletter, or you just keep reaching out, or you call them once in a while, but you should put them in a campaign plan, if you will, coming out of that. Right? So what else could I help share with you? That's sort of the soup to nuts, from step one, from setting it up all the way to the execution and the follow-up. Couple little tidbits we didn't talk about, maybe success stories thrown in there. Maybe if you're doing like why pay rent to own, you might have a couple of stories, whether it's live stories or a little video somebody makes of you of this is what they did working with you, and they were able to then turn around and get $150,000 in equity out of that 2 years later and buy their house of their dreams, right? Maybe a little storytelling weaved in to, again, make it applicable. So make your session, make it fun. Don't be afraid to have a little fun with it. It doesn't have to be super serious. Try to be creative, try to think outside the box, and what kind of things can you incorporate that would kind of keep people engaged, and also, connect with you. I know way back in the day, I'm talking way back in the day when I was an agent, and back in Westford, and I did a bunch of these actually very successfully. I did a bunch of first-time homebuyer seminars I used to run. And back then, you actually didn't see a lot of that in the marketplace. They weren't as popular as they are now, because people weren't as information driven. I'm not talking about pre-internet days, but it's pre some of your social media stuff you used to days. So it was a little harder to reach people. So I used to do sessions at the office, and I'd run them like once a month, and I'd usually get on average 5 to 10 people. Sometimes I'd get like a big group out of the blue. I'm not sure where they would come from, but I always used to try to have a little fun with it. And so one week I had this idea, and I went to the hardware store, and I said to the guy, do you have a box of old keys that you don't care about? And he goes, yeah, we keep a ton of those. Why? I said, can I have a bag of them? And so I played around with the keys. I taped keys. I had silver and gold keys And so the person with the gold key won a gift card in the end. Like I used to play around with stuff like that. So obviously you can't do something like that physical with the webinar, but you can do something. You can do something fun. So don't be afraid to be creative. Don't be afraid to have a little fun. People love that stuff. I actually, one of my best pictures, one of the clients, and I closed, you're not going to close 100% out of those. I mean, if you're closing 1 or 2 people every workshop, that's really good return, right? You're talking about a $10,000 commission check for pulling off 1 workshop. That's actually a pretty good return. And on average, that's usually what I would run, 1 or 2, sometimes more depending on the topic. But I used to, like once I did the thing with the key, the people who bought the house, then I took a picture of them with their key and used that in future workshops, right? So it's like, you can kind of build that following up, if you will, from that. And then you ask those people to share. Hey, I'm doing another workshop like you guys did when you bought your house. Will you share this with your friends? That's a great way to keep building it once you start this kind of process. So it doesn't have to be a sort of one and done deal, just so you know. Like set it up for something that could be sustainable long term. Questions, thoughts, ideas?
So Paula, my question actually centers around the technical piece of this, right? So I've been on these Zoom calls. I've actually done, Zoom gatherings with family or clients or that. I also participated both in Chris Stewart does the live on Facebook where he, is on a Zoom call with like 3 people and you can type in questions on the live Facebook feed. Yeah. And then I was also on the webinar with Nick Patio and Tom Ferry. And so it was just the 2 of them on the screen that you could see, but as a participant, you could, type in your questions, but you didn't have a Zoom screen of 25 people in the room, even though you might've only been talking to 2. So my question is more technical, like, how does that happen? How do you, how do you set those things up, or who in our office or who in our company, is skilled at setting those up?
Okay, so let's talk about the difference in the webinar versus, this is a Zoom meeting.
Right.
This is a Zoom meeting. I have a pro account, which lets me do unlimited timing. I think that's like $149 for the year. So it's not a lot of money that I paid, or it's like $14 a month. That pro account gives you unlimited timing, and I think I have up to 100 participants.
Right.
Something, and I get the recording, and you get all that piece. So this is the meeting. The thing like I did yesterday, and like what Nick Patio did, and what Chris Stewart does, those are called webinars. Mm-hmm. So a webinar gets set up, and what you do is you set it up as, it gets set up really the same way and gets shared. But as people come into the webinar, me as the host, I get to move them into the panel position. And when anybody I move into the panel position now becomes on the screen, and everybody else becomes a participant. So in a webinar, there's panelists and participants. Okay. The Facebook Live piece, that's next on my list, Jen. So I'll have more information on that. That's my next. I wanted to do that with yesterday's event, but honestly, I wasn't comfortable enough with the technology yet. So
right.
The next roundtable mastermind that I do, which will most likely be next week, we'll do in that combination. So I'll have more information once we do that in that tie-in. So,
Paula, quick question.
Yeah.
Another sort of technical question. I was just wondering, when you're doing a webinar, and like yesterday, there were 4 of you on it, can you see the participants?
No.
No, okay. Just curious, because there wasn't.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because honestly, for most of these type of things you're trying to do, I would head more towards a Zoom meeting, Jen, because of the face-to-face. If you end up with 50 participants, then yeah, that's going to get tricky, right? So you need to move that into a webinar. But ideally for you, this is a relationship building exercise.
Right.
And so it would be better to have, less, and again, unless you hit a really hot topic, but you typically, getting 10 to 15. And like right now on the screen, I get 10 pretty easily. You can go 12, 16 on the screen pretty easily. But yeah, that's a good point, Richard, though.
Yeah, I was just wondering because, I just was curious to know if you could, if you guys could see, what I was wearing, for example. As a matter of fact, yesterday, I forget who it was, Petrus, what's her candy?
Petrus?
Yeah, yes. She had said, she said
Gonna
something
do your
about,
hair.
you know, I don't want you wearing, don't wear,
Sweatpants.
you know, your sweatshirt. And I had a sweatshirt on, so I went running into the other room and put a dress shirt on, you know, and I'm just wondering if you saw me.
Nobody can see it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, so and technology can be a little challenging, right? So be comfortable with what you're going to use. You know, I would, like, for me, I know, like, the companies talked about looking at, what's the Microsoft one? Not Hangout, but Microsoft Meetings, I think it's called, or
Teams.
something. Yeah.
Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, and there's somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody plugged me into something called Slack online. You know, there's all kinds of options out there. For me,
Yeah.
what works best is to pick what works. Like, I've been on Zoom for years and it works, and obviously everybody in the world is now using Zoom. So, you know, stick to a platform you're comfortable with, so you're not trying to jump around. I mean, the Zoom works, it's not that expensive if you do have to upgrade the account. But, you know, again, stick to something that you're comfortable with. The Facebook Live piece for me, honestly, you know, just anything going live with that, you want to be prepped, right? Like, that's, I mean, even Chris Stewart stuff, it's like they're live on Facebook and they're figuring out the logistics of the, you know, oh, Dad, how was that? And how was your family? Like, you're watching it. It's kind of funny when you watch it after the fact. So
Yeah.
yesterday, the session I did yesterday, I was able to start the record right at the start of the session, right? So then I have a session to share maybe going forward. And that's another piece, you know, being able to record it so that you can then share that with maybe potential other home buyers and say, hey, I've got a home buyer seminar I just did. I'm happy to share that with you so we can kind of get up to speed on things. Now you kind of have a tool you can use going forward for folks that want it.
Okay.
And not have to just, you know, straight live duplicate it all the time. So,
Right.
There's another local brokerage that I got connected with, and I'm like somehow part of their like private coaching group on Facebook. And they do Facebook Lives for all of their agents.
yep, we know who you're talking about. Trust me, I used to work there. I know who you're talking about.
And so it's been interesting to tap into that as kind of get a feel for what's going on elsewhere in the market, and everything like that.
Hey, listen,
I know-
Brian, I'm tapped into that one too, just so you know. So, you know, looking around and getting ideas and checking out things, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
David, we have spies, David.
Well, and Paula, I know that you had mentioned that corporate or Commonwealth was possibly looking at a Zoom, some sort of thing. Is that still in the works, or has
I'm
that?
not sure what you're talking about. A Zoom what?
Oh,
like
I
a
thought-
Zoom.
I thought you had mentioned some sort of Zoom, like Zoom for Commonwealth kind of thing, premium plan.
You mean the Microsoft Teams?
No, well, they were going down that path. But if you're going to host a Zoom before you pay for an account, check in with me to see
Okay.
see what the options are on a corporate account. If there's any option to pull somebody in without having to repay up the account. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, either that, or I don't know if it makes sense to have like a Flutter account, because I assume that like you would probably be using one, then a few of the other
Yeah. So
the other
you
coaches,
yeah,
and
you
then
actually,
like an agent Flutter.
yeah, we potentially could do that, because yesterday I actually was on Nick Pazio's account because of the webinar piece, because we didn't get mine set up in time. Now the complication of that is Nick had a webinar from, you know, right before that, and I'm kicking him off the webinar because I got to get in the account. So that's the danger of that when you have it on one. And you know, for a while, Debbie was using my account to make it easier for her. And some of you guys saw that caused complications because I had interviews and she was trying to do training and we're kicking each other off. So
Right.
yeah, but we might be able to do something like that where we sign off. I mean, it might even be that you could use my pro account if you needed to, if I could block it off for you so that you know it's available and you don't have to worry about, you know, anybody
Mhm.
off if you don't want to pay for that. That's fine.
Um,
We can obviously get creative. We can always get creative. David?
Paula, is there any information about the website?
The
Individual agent website. You said something.
yeah, the
about
last
that,
it's still in
web.
development piece. The last I heard in terms of the national one.
Yes.
Yeah, the last I heard, and I'll have to go back and take a look at the notes, but you know, because they were originally shooting for March, obviously COVID switched up some focus on the development stuff. And so I think the last thing we heard was that they're just at this point saying like May, June and pushing it out. but it is in process. A couple people have told me that they were out there. I haven't gone to look to see where it's at. My understanding is it's going to be a couple stages. You're going to get a static page, and then over time, over the next couple months, then you'll get editability. You'll be able to edit that. So, and you do have a page through Commonwealth, but they're not really websites. They're really kind of flat pages. The Commonwealth one is a flat page that you can edit and update, make it your own. Okay. Good. Easy.
I had a specific question. I'm in the process of finalizing kind of something like this with a insurance connection that I have.
Yep.
And looking for a lender kind of to round out the three of us. Do we have people in the office that we could work with?
Yeah, you're Somerville, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got Mike from Wells Fargo that's always on our team meetings.
Mm-hmm.
You could easily reach out to him. We've got a gentleman out of Newton. We've got a couple of options. I can send you.
Okay. I know that some other people have worked with some local lenders.